And now I'm going to turn this over to Marianne, who will take us through the rest of our service.
Get my hair out of there.
Do.
Oh, and I have to turn it on? Okay. Welcome to worship. I recently did an online workshop for about 45 incoming Unitarian and Universalist ministers about rituals for death and dying. And it ended up being a really good piece for me to share and to also just be reminded of how the lack of ritual in our society, we've lost so much of that, how important it is because it speaks beyond words. In just a moment, as part of our opening meditation, I'm going to read a poem from John O'Donohue. Some of you may know him. I'm going to say a little bit more about him. He's Irish. He was Irish. He's since passed away, but did a lot about blessing. He has a wonderful book, To Bless the Space Between Us. And if there's anything for the world right now and our dealing with the world and all that we are dealing with, I would highly recommend To Bless the Space Between Us. It just addresses so much. So before that, I just wanted to start with a very small ritual, just embodied, so we'll just remember that. And I would just ask you to open your left hand and just one thing that may be challenging you, something that's bringing perhaps sorrow, and let it be in that hand just to feel the weight of that. Just let it be there. Name it for yourself. And in the other hand, I'm going to go 3 things you're grateful for. 3 things that you feel are a blessing for you in your life. 3 things you're grateful for. Including the very breath we breathe. And very slowly bringing those together and bringing them to our heart, our universalist heart, so full of love, for healing, for appreciation, for blessing. So may it be. In the book, To Bless the Spaces Between Us, from John O'Donohue, this is called For One Who is Exhausted. You may recognize parts of this in yourself and others in the world. And I will talk about this later. In this particular way, he has this poem. He begins with the naming of things, and then when he starts saying may, that becomes the blessing. So, For One Who is Exhausted, from John O'Donohue. I invite you into a moment of quiet reflection as we enter these words. When the rhythm of the heart becomes hectic, time takes on the strain until it breaks. Something within you has closed down and you cannot push yourself back to life. And you have been forced to enter empty time. The desire that drove you has relinquished. There is nothing else to do now but rest and patiently learn to receive the self you have forsaken in the race of days. At first, your thinking will darken and sadness may take over like listless weather. The flow of unwept tears will frighten you. You have traveled too fast over false ground, and now your soul has come back to take you back. And here comes the blessing. May you take refuge in your senses, open up to all the small miracles you rushed through. Be inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls down slow and free. May you imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open the well of color that fostered the brightness of day. Draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. Be excessively gentle with yourself. Stay clear of those at present who are vexed in spirit. Learn to linger around someone of ease who feels they have all the time in the world. And gradually you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart and the joy that dwells far within slow time. For one who is exhausted, by John O'Donohue. I'll invite you into a moment of common prayer. Gracious Spirit of love and light, we come to you in gratitude for this day. We come here seeking blessings for our own heart, our own troubles and challenges, and those of the world. And with the love gathered here, we remember who we are, and we also remember the world. And those who may be shaken in mind, body, or spirit throughout the world. Those who are facing violence or the threat of violence. Those with so much on our plate. All the caregivers, all the workers, the parents, those who love this world and are concerned for it. And so we encircle this globe with our care. May it bless those who may be suffering in mind, body, or spirit, all beings. From our heart outward. And so may that blessing be. So may it be. Shalom, salam. Blessed be. Amen. Just realized in my folder, I have this thing called The 10 Habits of Highly Relaxed People. Begin your day with mindfulness and a deep gratitude for being alive. That's a good way to start. So I entitled the sermon a wee bit about universalism and a wee bit about blessing. And Jan is going to talk further about universalism next Sunday, which makes me very happy because I don't feel like I have to cover a lot of it. But downstairs in this building, which was 1875, right? That's the date of the building. And then the Universalists were here in 1850. Is that right? Yes. God is love. And that can be looked at in many ways. God is love. Now, the early Universalists, and there were like 55 congregations in Indiana, and there were circuit riders who went around to these different congregations because it was so unusual, 1850s, to say all souls are saved. Back when that was an important theology, because so many theologies back then were saying these people are saved and these not. Even the Presbyterians that I grew up with, which I don't remember any of this, were saying oh, they're predestined. Who's going to be saved and who's not, doesn't matter what you do. It's already determined, which I thought was very controlling. And then these universalists came along and said, all souls are saved. Well, there's a lot more to that, because then they're saying all souls are equal. And then they're saying, oh, each person has inherent worth and dignity. So there's a relational theology when we say God is love, and seeing the, as Ralph Waldo Emerson, one time Unitarian preacher, said, the spark of the sacred in each person, the namaste. Each person is holy and equal. And there's a bigger part to saying God is love, and that is, how do we conceive of the world? Like, what is this huge universe? What does that mean to us theologically? Some of you know I describe myself as a mystic and a humanist, or a humanist and a mystic, depending on the day. Sometimes I'm just drinking in science and what we're learning from everything. And other times I'm drinking in poetry and love and sacred texts. And what are we learning from our love? And my experience of this universe, both from a science perspective, but also from a lived perspective, is that there is a love that flows through this universe. And sometimes we can actually feel that. A lot of people feel it in nature, but sometimes we feel it with other people. And I said, that's the gift of congregation. Sometimes when we can't feel that love ourselves, another person can reflect it back to us. Or we find it in nature, and that becomes also a blessing. The very way we conceive of the world. Do you see a tree as sacred? If you do, and you go sit with your back on it, there's going to be more happening there than just, there's a tree, right? No, it's breathing in carbon dioxide, breathing out oxygen. There's something happening here. So I want to talk a little bit about St. Patrick now. So back in the day, he was born in the late 4th century. So then it was like the Catholic Church, the Protestant Revolution had not happened yet or anything like that. And I want to say there's a lot of legend about St. Patrick as we approached St. Patrick's Day, and I'm going to stick with most of the legend, but kind of point it out as I go along. Born in 4th century in Roman Britain, he was not born in Ireland. Some of you know that. And the Roman occupation was this, then it was slowly starting to leave at that point, but it was still there. He grew up as a Christian family, but said he did not know God at that time. So this is what he said in his Confessio, his little autobiography written later, that at age 16, he was captured by Irish raiders and taken to Ireland as a slave. He spent 6 years there as a herdsman, often in harsh, very isolated conditions. It's also possible, I read all the little things about what really was, at that time, at age 16, the Romans basically conscripted in anybody there and had them work and do things for the next 6 years of their life. So a lot of teenagers fled and went to other places and then came back later. But St. Patrick said that he was captured by Irish raiders, and so we're going to go with that legend. He had a spiritual awakening after being there those years and found a way to connect with a ship that took him back to his family. But once he got there, he had another vision that told him to go back to the Irish people. He had been ordained a bishop at that time, and he returned to the land of his former captors to bring, at that time, the message of Christianity. Now, There were Celtic folks in that region, the Druids, the tree lovers, but really the Druids were the priests of the time in the Celtic way, the legal folks, the medical folks, they were kind of the leaders of the communities. And in 5th century, the civilized Romans kind of viewed the Irish as barbarians. So like even outside of God's grace. So the fact that Saint Francis went back, some would say that is a divine love. That was a universal love that he was expressing as he did that. And also to go back to the people who had oppressed him was that reaching out to the enemy for reconciliation. And a lot of his, as I said, were visions and things like that, meaning he didn't just follow what the orthodoxy was of the day and what the creeds were, that there was an inner spirituality, that we are capable of owning our own spirituality within. And so there were things that you could see about St. Patrick, the legend of, that I hope you'll think about on this St. Patrick's Day, and maybe what part of his life was about. But what is the heart of blessing? I said a little earlier, it was how we look at the world. John O'Donohue, who wrote the poem for the meditation, was a former Catholic priest, the 20th and 21st century, died, I think, about 20 years ago. He was a beloved Irish teacher. I loved all the things he wrote. He was a poet, and he loved teaching about Celtic spirituality, and I love reading it. He wrote this: despite all the darkness, human hope is based on the instinct that at the deepest level of reality, some intimate kindness holds sway. I think that's universalist through and through. And he goes on to say, this is the heart of blessing. To believe in blessing is to believe that our being here, each of us, our very presence in the world is the first gift. That is the primal blessing that each of us brings to ourselves and to each other. So that's a big prelude. Universalism, a bit about St. Patrick's, and now I'm going to enter in about blessing. Now, we gather this morning, a week after daylight saving time came barging into existence at 2 a.m. last Sunday, prompting our clocks to spring forward and provide the illusion of saved time. I'm not a fan. In his book, Anam Cara, and Anam Cara means soul friend, spiritual wisdom from the Celtic world, John O'Donohue says the following about time and blessing. The human mind cannot encompass the full weight of time, which is why I always think it's so strange we have daylight savings time. But so we break it up into divisions that we feel like we can manage. But the word occasion suggests a period of special time when something of significance unfolds. In Western culture, occasion is now a mere social occasion. Yet for the person who lives time consciously, there is a continuous undertow of possibility always at work. Accordingly, time is received and appreciated as continuous occasions of invitation. Every moment could be an invitation to suddenly notice the sign over here, 1850. The yellow, that is an invitation to just be with that moment. That is a blessing. To live like this, appreciating a continuous occasions of invitation, is growth, to become more than you have been, to transform loss into presence, and to allow what is false to fall away. At the gates of time, he says, blessings await to usher us toward the grace we need. if we could just take an invitation for those moments. Again, I want to say, sometimes our hearts are blocked. We're worn out, we're exhausted, as O'Donoghue says. And we might not be able to find that exactly for ourselves. And then somebody else brings it to us, or something else. In the book, To Bless the Space Between Us, O'Donoghue has a poem called Beannacht, which means blessing. Now, I want to say a curragh is a traditional Irish rowboat and is covered in a tarred canvas because he uses the word curragh in this. And this is Beannacht by John O'Donoghue. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken you. Meadow of delight. And when the canvas frays in the curragh of thought, and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. Beannacht by John O'Donoghue. O'Donoghue would tell you that the language of blessing is an invocation, a calling forth. It is also a benediction, which is why that word may occurs throughout the book of blessings and in this very poem. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken you. And he does that repeatedly. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of the light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. And may the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. There is a meditation posture. There's really 4 archetypes, and one is sitting meditation. One is walking meditation, which is kind of known as a meditation you do that helps you figure out things if you got something going on, that walking in a meditative way. There's standing meditation, often a good one for leaders to do, where we step into something, just with the eyes to the horizon. And there's also a meditation posture known as the lying down meditation. And it is known as a healing posture for the heart and soul. When I read the poem for one who's exhausted that I use for meditation, I think of people lying down with their hand on their heart and on the belly. That's the position. Learn to linger around someone of ease who feels they have all the time in the world. Gradually, you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart and the joy that dwells far within slow time. That is a blessing. I myself do a lot of lying down on the ground. It is, I think, a part of my theology, lying down on the ground. Some of you may going, I really don't have a place to do that. If you do have a home and a place lying around, the neighbors do get used to it after a while. There's one pose in yoga called corpse pose where you lay down face down. We have zoysia grass. I was talking on half of our lawn that's come over from our neighbor, and I was lying down on that because I could smell the grass so well. And our neighbor Laura looked out the window and she's like, "Oh, Marianne's collapsed." And then she thought for a moment, maybe not. So she watched for a while, and then I got up, and then she just said, "Yeah, I'm getting to know you." But it is good to lie down on the ground, and it could be, inside. Place your hand on your heart and your belly if you're able-bodied, or to just lean back into a chair. It's an incredibly healing posture to do that. They said if we do that a half hour every day, our days will be changed. So I have a little story. It begins with a gathering of Unitarian Universalist clergy for a colleague's ordination. The evening of the ordination, there was a lively reception afterwards. I walked down to the room where at least 20 clergy had robed earlier, and we'd offered our prayerful support of the new minister, which is always pretty exciting. I walked down there, and three of my colleagues, whom I had rarely seen anymore, were sequestered in quiet conversation. One looked up when I walked in and said, "This is where the introverts hang out." I sat with them for a while in the midst of discarded robes and stoles and tattered orders of service and notebooks. And at one point, the conversation turned to the Ohio Valley Study Group and the Prairie Study Group. I knew of these. These are events where colleagues gather together and they write theological papers about topics. They present them. It's very solidly academic, and theological discussions take place. And I said, I've never been involved in any of the study groups. "It's never too late," one of my colleagues, who I'm really deeply respected, said. But the next thing that came out of my mouth surprised me. "I prefer lying down on the ground," I said. My colleagues looked at me perplexed. A rather remarkable silence entered as we all waited for a further explanation, including myself. It's one of the first times I used that. I mean, I did it, but I had never said I did this. The conversation returned to the study groups, the advantages of intellectual stimulation, collegial inspiration, and I remember trying to find something intelligent to say when a colleague asked me if, again, I might be interested. And I said it again, "Well, I prefer lying down on the ground." And I felt myself cringe. It's like, why do you keep saying this? And then I said, "And maybe it's just time for me to go home." It was a really misty night. I remember that as I was driving home. And I was thinking about that. How my spiritual practices have changed from the deep theological study I used to love. And now it involves more silence than talk, more belonging to the earth than to electronic devices, more stillness than striving, the kind that connects, creates gratitude and blessing. And it was the first time that I realized on that misty night how powerful the lying down meditation posture, particularly on the ground, had become to me. If blessing is how we see the world and we see the earth as sacred, I do. And think about it. Lying down, feeling my breath being held literally by this sacred world, my rib cage, so I can explore my inner world and hold that. It is a healing posture, which in our current hurting world provides a needed nurturance. Let nature nurture, I like to say. And I bet the Celts practice lying down on the ground meditation as part of their spirituality without even a second thought, because they didn't see secular and sacred. It all was sacred. Again, in Anamkara, which means soul friend, O'Donoghue states, all through Celtic poetry, you find the color, power, and intensity of nature. How beautifully it recognizes the wind, the flowers, the breaking of the waves on the land. Celtic spirituality hallows the moon and adores the life force of the sun. Many of the ancient Celtic gods were close to the sources of fertility and belonging. Since the Celts were a nature people, the world of nature was both presence and companion. Nature nourished them. It was here that they felt their deepest belonging and infinity. That's where they felt their belonging. Celtic nature poetry is suffused with this warmth and wonder and belonging. Now, one of the oldest Celtic prayers is a prayer called St. Patrick's Breastplate. Now, the Celts were an oral tradition, but this one came through. It's in about the fourth verse, I think, of what became St. Patrick's breastplate, which was, I believe, written after him. But they had this fourth verse, and this is the part they felt was the ancient Celtic poem, because it's an invocation. And it says, I arise today with the strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of sea, and stability of earth. An ancient Celtic poem from a land which would later become Ireland. They say it had many authors because it was an oral tradition handed down all that time. In the more recent past of Ireland, male poets have dominated the Irish landscape, men who often depict Ireland as a woman. Now I'm getting into the Women's History Month part of the sermon. Have simplified and romanticized the versions. There's the loyal mother, the birther of soldiers, virtuous goddess, the young virgin. The female allegory for a long time has lacked a depth of character and resulted in stereotypical images of womanhood in Ireland. Images that were silent and objectified. So this morning, as part of Women's History Month, I looked up and I want to include an important women's voice from Ireland, poet Yvonne Boland. And she gives flesh and blood to the Irish women's experience. Born in 1944 in Dublin, Boland shares that early in her career, she felt a lack of female poetic voices from Ireland. I began writing in a country where the word woman and the word poet were almost magnetically opposed. She discovered her poetic voice was like shouting across a distance. So here's her poem, Mother Ireland. Interesting, it is a voice that begins in a lying down position. It's more passive, a part of the landscape, and feeling a little pelted by other voices trying to define her. I like to think of her lying down and healing, and then regaining the strength to rise into her own subjective voice and experience. Mother Island by Yvonne Boland. At first, I was land. I lay on my back to the fields, and when I turned on my side, I was a hill under freezing stars. I did not see and I was not seen. Night and day words fell on me, seeds, raindrops, chips of frost. From one of them I learned my name. I rose up and I remembered it. Now I could tell my story. It was different from the story told about me, and now also it was spring and I could see the wound I had left in the land by leaving it. I traveled west. Once there, I looked with so much love at every field as it unfolded, its rusted wheel and pram chassis and gorse, bright distances. They had misunderstood me and said, come back to us. Trust me, I whispered. The discovery of that inner self, our inner spirituality. Again, despite all the darkness, human hope is based on the instinct that the deepest level of reality, some intimate kindness holds sway. This is the heart of blessing. To believe in blessing is to believe that that even our being, our very presence in the world is the first gift. And that is a primal blessing. Lastly, I wanted to say that earlier I talked about blessing as both a worldview, but also relational blessing, how we are with each other. I was recently contacted, some of you know I did an interim in Louisville last couple of years, ministry. And there's something there called LSERS, Louisville Showing Up for Racial Justice. They know I was in contact with one of the Universalist churches up here, and they contacted me and they sent me this message to share with you. One of the groups there, Carla Humana, needs volunteers to help transport released immigrant neighbors back home. Can you help? As ICE immigration enforcement escalates, more and more of our neighbors who are picked up in Illinois and Indiana and other states are being held in certain jails in Kentucky. When they are released, they are left stranded there, hours from home, with only what they had on them at the time of their detention. In response, a group of volunteers has been established who can be on call to help transport these folks back home. We try to keep each leg of the transport to less than 2 hours, going 4 hours round trip for the volunteers. So usually they're putting together a relay right now. And I just talked to the person who contacted me and they said more and more people are being let out right now. And they said, although we work with a number of organizations on this, including Indiana AID, Assistance to Immigrants in Detention, we and they need more volunteers that can take the pieces of the relay through Indiana. A typical route, for instance, may go to Louisville and then back to Indianapolis. And then on to a destination, you would take them maybe to a home or to a bus station so they could get from there to maybe Chicago. This to me is the universalist part. This is that equality we see in each person. They said we can also use volunteers to just wait with neighbors at the bus or the train station. So if you're in Indy, you could just go there and be with a person until someone came. So I have the contact information about whom you could contact about that. And they wanted to reach out to Unitarian Universalist congregations. They know us, they know our work, they know the work very well, what they're doing in Louisville, and there's a trust there. And I think it's a trust we've earned. You've earned it over 175 years. I think that's good enough. So I'll make sure this is in the next newsletter. Yes, and I think I'm certainly going to join this and help. It just, what I heard is just like, yeah, we need help and we need it now. Universalism, God is love. With St. Patrick's Day on the horizon, a little bit about Ireland and the peace there, but also how do you view the world? What is sacred to you? And how can you connect with that so that your soul is fed, so that you might help other souls, right? I'm a lying on the ground kind of person. You may not be, that's cool. But find what that is for you, what that nurturance is. And may that be my blessing for you. May that be a part of each of your days. May it hold you in the brokenness of ourselves and the world. May it bless you as you go forward. And may we care for one another, care for our world, care for those who need us now, and care for ourselves. So may it be. Amen. Blessed be. Top of the morning to you. And you know what the answer to that is? Does anybody know the response? And the rest of the day to you.
Well, although Marianne and I did not talk about this, apparently our minds were on the same track. So our closing words are from an Irish blessing. And I hope you'll pardon me for just a tiny little gender shift because it's Women's History Month. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rains fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of her hand.